It really does take a lot of people to create a program like Generation Next. And this is our second formal year of being involved with this great organization that unites college faculty from around the country. And I really do hope that you are involved in all the offerings that they provide for you today. Well, Generation Next is a very important program to NAMM, to our organization. You saw our corporate video. You saw kind of the background of NAMM as a trade association, 114 years old. I know you're dying to get across the street to the 1,600 music project exhibitors that are there. But we invented this program maybe 5 or 6 years ago because we had an intention to want to inspire music students, young people, to really look at the industry and all the career options that were available to them. We heard this great group this morning from the Los Angeles College of Music. Weren't they terrific, Masumi? You know, there's so many pathways in the field of music. Singer, songwriter, the great instrumentalist we saw up on the stage with Masumi. Also, one of my favorite gigs, you know, I've never done it, but I've dreamed about it, being a backup singer. I think, you know, there's so many things that you can do, but these couple of days here at NAMM is a chance for you to say, there's other things that you can do. There's marketing in the industry, there's support for product development, there's innovation and creation of all sorts. And we're relying on you to guide our future and be part of it. Well, we always really want to bring someone that can inspire us, can help us understand the process of creativity, can help us understand a life in music. And we're just so honored today to bring with you the artist, musician that's joining us this morning. This all happened again because of a very important collaboration with the Los Angeles College of Music, and we're grateful to the faculty, administration, the students. Are there students from this place here today? Am I going to hear you? Los Angeles College of Music. We're grateful for your creativity and all the important things you're doing for music. So this is a moment that we have that very few people have, is to sit kind of quietly and to talk to someone that is truly an innovator in the field of music. Please join me in welcoming Moby.
Hi. Hello. How are you?
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
So I just had an idea.
You just had an idea?
Yeah. Which is standing backstage, and I'm very tired because I woke up at 6 this morning. And I feel bad complaining because I have a lot of friends who have kids and whatever who wake up at 6 all the time, but I'm a big sissy.
Right.
And I don't wake up at, I mean, it was dark outside.
It was dark.
You know how barbaric
in LA,
that is?
Dark,
like,
right?
every cell in your body is saying, like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be in bed asleep.
Okay.
But, so I'm standing back there, tired and caffeinated, and we're all familiar with the world of scholarships, right?
Oh, yeah.
To state the obvious. Scholarships exist, like you're going to go to college, you apply for a scholarship to help you pay for college, but almost everybody I know is burdened with student loans. Why don't they have postgraduate scholarships? Meaning, like, someone graduates from college with $50,000 in student loan debt. Shouldn't there be scholarships that people could apply for that enable them to pay off their student loans?
That's a very good idea.
So that's, I'm done. Okay.
So what are we going to do about that problem? Let's
I don't
think
know.
about that problem, right?
Okay.
So in other words, it's kind of a career development scholarship as opposed to a college degree, getting a college degree.
Well, it's paying off, like, because when you're, and in a way, it's almost like the way you tip at a restaurant. Like, you tip after the meal. You don't tip before the meal. So, like, a scholarship before someone goes to college, like, you could theoretically just be, like, subsidizing someone's crystal meth addiction. Right. You know? Like, I'm gonna go play hacky sack and get stoned for 4 years.
Well, I think, you know, Moby, we do count on you for a lot of ideas. I really do like that idea. You know, we have a scholarship that helps bring students here to this show. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe you've sparked another idea. How do we help students make those first couple of years steps into the industry at the same time they're burdened by the realities of their education?
Yeah.
Anyway, great idea. wonderful to have you here. Thank you for getting up early, coming down the pike.
6 a.m.
6 a.m.
Oh, God.
We hope your time with us will be
Yeah.
as inspiring for you as I know it will be for us. But part of our time here with our students, all aspirational lives in front of us, seeking careers in music, is to really hear a little bit more about your journey, you know, and your experience and the creative process, your life in the industry, ups and downs, ebb and flows, and ultimately, you know, you get to be a little bit of a sage, have a little advice, share a little advice.
So I have one question. So the people here, is everyone here more interested in like making music, selling musical equipment? What?
I think a big combination, right?
Who am I talking to?
I think we have a lot. Making music, I mean, performing. Well, right,
Okay.
right. I mean,
And like
business,
working
music business
business-wise?
majors, right? We have, I think we're, yeah. And almost always in a music business track, you have a big performance requirement. You're coming out of that performance requirement, and then you take that little, you know, that little junction ahead.
I just
So
wanted
it's
to know
really
who I was talking to.
Yeah. So, and average age probably a lot less than yours and mine. So.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'll be sure to say a lot of things like, well, back in my day,
Right. No, I get to say that, not you. Right.
when we invented the train.
So we have to start in the early years. All right. Let's start. I mean, who was your first instruments, your first teachers? It's always valuable to get a base and
Yeah,
understand.
well, I started playing guitar when I was 9 years old. My mom had been a classical pianist, and everyone in my family played music. So I grew up around instruments, started playing classical guitar and studying music theory when I was 9. And then when I was around 13 or 14, I discovered punk rock, and then stopped listening to complicated music and started listening to The Clash and the Bad Brains, and
Right.
broke my guitar teacher's heart. Because
I
he just
can
wanted me to
imagine.
be this like virtuoso jazz fusion guy, and I wanted to play like Ramones songs.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a knife through someone's heart somewhere
Yeah.
in that moment. But when you said you studied classical guitar, I mean, so you really did, you know, you read music and you understood theory, you did chord structure,
Oh, yeah.
voicing, and all of that. So then when you made the transition to the unmusic, the punk rock, it's not unmusic, but it's,
Yeah.
did you, it didn't inform that at all?
Oh, it did.
It did.
It did.
See,
And
I've been wanting somebody to confess this for years.
Oh, and
that
even-
it did inform. I mean, not you particularly, but you know, in other words, it's not a.
No, it's not
music
either.
is still in there.
I mean, you could, if you look at the history of like 20th century art, music, culture, whatever, like even look at someone like Jackson Pollock, you know, the abstract expressionist. Like he came from a figurative, formal background, or Marcel Duchamp, or a lot, even like Miles Davis, like as he became more, or John Coltrane, when they experimented, they had a traditional background. So the fact that I had a very traditional music background, I think served me really well as I moved into more sort of experimental, unconventional types of music.
And if if there's little nuggets of wisdom or advice along the way, from every musician I've ever interviewed, talked, from Wynton Marsalis to, David Gilbert, the conductor of the New York Philharmonic, it's just like you've got to have the basics somewhere, and the basics sort of started innocently, right? And you rejected them, but
Not
they
so
were
much
still
rejected, more just
moved
my
on.
enthusiasms took me in other directions. Because
is
ultimately,
Right.
my goal as both a musician and a listener, I'm sort of in service. By the way, the slap back against the back of the room is disconcerting because I hear everything I'm saying an eighth of a second later.
Can you fix that? Or
No, I think the only way I could fix it is like blow up that wall back there.
Oh, okay. Well, we could try.
Yeah, it's like,
But we want to come back to Anaheim, right? Right.
but a lot of, and I'm not going to malign the world of virtuoso musicianship, but virtuoso musicianship has to exist in service of the emotional content of music, and so meaning my goal is to both create and listen to music that really resonates with me emotionally, and I don't care how it's made. We don't need the monitors as much because it's on the edge of feeding back. Thanks. So it's whether it's listening to Rhapsody in Blue, or Drop It Like It's Hot by the Neptunes and Snoop Dogg. Like,
Right.
Rhapsody in Blue is so complicated and flawless and beautiful. Drop It Like It's Hot doesn't have music in it, but it's still amazing.
Right.
And so the two things can perfectly coexist. You know, you can have rudimentary non-musical music that's very emotional, coexisting perfectly with super complicated symphonic classical music. And because ultimately, music is something that each person, forgive me because I'm stating the obvious, but it's something that each person relates to subjectively. There's no such thing as objective criteria for evaluating music. You know, you can't say, even there's no objective criteria for evaluating a recording. You know, and if you doubt that, go on YouTube and listen to Billie Holiday singing Strange Fruit. You know, a microphone 15 feet away from her, you can barely hear her, barely hear the instrumentation, and it's perfect. No fidelity, and it's so emotional. So like, music can be anything. It can be recorded and disseminated however you want. It's up to the individual to determine whether it's good or not.
But I think what you said is very freeing. You know, I think that probably reflects your journey too. You're at a place that you had that classical beginning, the rudimentary beginning, and then you took a branch early, and then you built and built and built and built. I think it's very
And that
freeing.
ultimate
validating.
question,
It's very validating.
yeah, that ultimate question, not how should I be responding to this music, but how do I respond to the music?
Right.
You know, and be open to everything. You know, because I have a lot of friends who are like jazz guys who only listen to jazz. I'm like, come on, like jazz is great, but there's so many other amazing genres out there. Like, why arbitrarily restrict yourself, especially now that music doesn't cost anything? You know, like in the olden days, if you had $20 to spend on a CD, you'd be like, well, I only want to buy this CD in this genre that I love. And now, like, go on Spotify or Pandora, it doesn't cost anything. Experiment, listen to all these different musicians and different genres.
It's maybe part of our new, you could say, sort of our professionalism is to have broad understanding of music, too, right? Is to take it all, and it's like a smorgasbord.
Yeah.
And to really experience and be open to it. Any significant first teachers besides the one that you put the knife through the heart, or?
No. You know the expression autodidact? Like, so I'm sort of, I mean, I had like 5 years of traditional, you know, studying like classical music, jazz fusion, music theory, and after that, everything's self-taught.
Yeah, yeah. And now that's so much, it's so much easier, in essence, to with technology. But teachers were there for you, your family was there for you, they bolstered you, they gave you the opportunity. You know, a lot of what NAMM and the NAMM Foundation is concerned about is to assure that all children have the chance to learn music, so they can enter into the pool and swim, you know.
And what I think is really interesting, and not just in the world of music and arts, but in a lot of different sort of healing modalities. I know I sound like a cliched New Age Southern Californian,
Right.
but
He's really from New York.
Yeah.
I'm never going to let you down on
yeah,
that.
born on 148th Street.
Right. We're really not happy about that.
Me leaving?
Yeah. We're really.
Blame
And-
Whitey.
Right. We think you might come
Yeah.
back eventually. Anyway, I digress. So.
What I was going to say is, up until recently, the way people responded to things was all anecdotal. So for example, if you were to make a compelling case for music education, arts education, it was all like saying, oh, we like it, therefore it should exist. And now there are all these amazing diagnostics where you can say like, oh, music education increases test scores. It increases SAT scores. It actually, like, so it's not just saying we should have it because it's fun. Or we
Right.
should have it because it's nice. You can actually point to sort of like an empirical utility for arts education and music education, and how it develops, how it helps people on their endocrine system, neurochemically, what have you. And which is, I think, going to support a lot of, like when people go before a school board and saying, you give us money, why do we have a football team that is giving kids traumatic brain injury, and we're taking money away from arts education, to fund these
Right.
These dudes who are just gonna like be date rapists, like why not, take that money and fund arts education, which doesn't cause traumatic brain injury, which actually does encourage,
Mm-hmm.
neurological development and increases test scores.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely are on our page in terms of the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in terms of music education advocacy, and we fund a lot of research that you've talked about, we've funded, and we do take it to Capitol Hill, and we take it to school boards and whatnot. And sometimes I wonder, all that research is really, really valid. And it's kind of a sign of our times that we have to even bring the research forward, you know, because ultimately this is a cultural heritage. It is a human heritage. We are all filled with music. So,
Yep.
but we have to do this work of advocacy. We have to convince and help people make the right decisions.
Well, I started working about 12 years ago with this organization in New York called the Institute for Music and Neurologic Function.
Right.
It was started by Dr. Connie Tomeno and
great.
Oliver Sacks.
Yeah.
And it's a music therapy organization, but really what they've focused on is documented evidence showing that music is one of the most powerful healing modalities on the planet. Which sounds like cliched hippie talk, but it's true. Like that's what, and so you can't just dismiss it and say like, hippie, you know, go eat granola and smoke pot. You can say, no, look, we've just spent, yeah, it's legal. They've just spent 20 years doing MRIs and blood work and gathering all this data saying that music is such a remarkable force for healing. And not just because we say so, but because it is. You know, documented, objective fact that music is one of the most powerful healing modalities on the planet, and we sort of give it short shrift because it's everywhere.
Let's hope that all this new data, new research, and that wonderful work of Connie Tomeo, respect so much, will lead us to this new era, right? Where music is really considered to be part of the formula for wellness, healing, life, a good life.
Yeah,
right.
And where I mean, I don't know if this is relevant to what you guys want to talk about at all, but it's this idea of like trusting our own experience, you know, because traditionally we outsource our well-being to experts. You know, we're like, oh, well, for healing to be legitimate, it has to come from a doctor. For spirituality to be legitimate, it has to come from a priest or something. And the truth is, like, so much of our individual experience has such legitimacy and such amazing power to heal, and now we're actually able to sort of like say that that is in fact objectively true.
I think you've just told us a lot about your music by saying that.
I did?
Don't you think? Okay. I mean, isn't that your musical process, which I want to spend a little time on. But before I do, what was the moment when you kind of knew music was it? Was it about that punk rock moment in your early teen years, or were you sucked in? It was just a flow that you just went with?
I think that's a good question. I was 3 years old, and I was in the car with my mom, and Proud Mary by Creedence Clearwater Revival came on. And I refused to get out of the car until the song ended.
Wow.
And I think at that moment, my mom knew at some point I would become part of a 12-step organization. And also that I would spend my entire life working on music. Because literally, I love so many different things, so many different art forms, but nothing has ever affected me as powerfully as music does.
Have we all kind of nod our heads about that? Have you all had a moment? I mean, there was some time, right? I mean, there's just... I can relate in my own life to but I don't talk about them, I'm talking about them now, but I don't talk, it's almost like a mystical kind of thing. And I do think, you know, again, it goes to all the research that we now know, there are things that do happen, you know, when all those, you know, synapses, neurons fire on a spiritual, emotional way. I mean, it was kind of almost the ensemble that I was seeing was almost kind of was levitated in front of me when I was 9 years old. I mean, it was the sound, you know, it was this and you know, I think if we all had a support group about this, we all would probably reveal a lot more about that core moment when it just you couldn't get out of a car. You know, you were immobilized by.
And what's amazing, and your music is so ubiquitous, and we all take for granted that it affects us powerfully. But ultimately, what's so amazing, it doesn't exist.
Right.
You know, music is technically just air molecules moving a little differently. You know, the compression and rarefaction that's hitting our inner ear, it's just a little bit different than a truck or me talking, you know, but yet music, which is just air moving a little differently, is played at, you know, baptisms and deaths, weddings, sports events. It makes people dance, it makes people have sex, it makes people get bad tattoos. It makes people, you know, like, it makes armies march into war. Like, so it affects people so powerfully, and it technically doesn't exist. Like, it's just
It's made up.
air molecules.
It's made up.
You know, and
We make it up.
that, I think, is one of the reasons why music has this amazing spiritual quality, is because there is no corporeal component to it.
It's temporal.
Yeah, and but we all just take it for granted. Like, you play your favorite song, and it affects you so profoundly, but that's why we're all here. You know, because, I mean, this whole the hundreds of thousands of people who are going to come through here in the next couple of days, it's all because air has hit their ears a little bit differently.
Right.
And that's it. All the technology, the billions and billions and billions of dollars, you know, 100,000 people in a sports stadium seeing the Rolling Stones or whomever. I was going to say Justin Bieber, but that seems to malign what we're talking about.
Now.
So
It all matters.
yeah, but and it's just, so people like crying and dancing and celebrating and hugging each other because air is touching them differently.
Right.
You know, it's amazing.
So, yeah, thank the man for great thinking. So let's talk about the first commercial success, which came quickly, right? Relatively quickly? Is that?
Depends, because when I was 14, I started playing in a punk rock band called the Vatican Commandos. And I'm not kidding, our first show, the audience was one dog. And I'm not exaggerating.
But we won't really put that in the commercial success category.
My friends and I in the band, we set up in my friend John's garage, and we invited a bunch of friends over. None of our friends came, and his dog Sparky came. And it was very memorable, because afterwards we made spaghetti, and Sparky was this little terrier, and he jumped up on the table and swallowed an entire stick of butter. So I don't remember the show. All I remember
really inspired by
is
the
little Sparky,
performance.
inspired by our punk rock, to swallow a stick of butter.
Right. All right, so after that, then, I mean, talk about when you launched your first album, and, you know, when things really started rolling.
Well, I played in punk rock bands in the 80s with no success. And then the early 90s, I started making relatively obscure electronic dance music. And the first single I made sold 300 copies. Then the next single was a big success and sold 2,500 copies. I was like, 2,500 people have bought a record that I made. And then the next single was this weird top 10 single that sold like over 1 million copies. And then the next couple of years were really good, but then like the late 90s, things really went downhill.
Were you on a label in the early 90s then?
I was on
all done through, and we don't, you know, we have to be careful talking about the label.
Oh no, it's fine.
It's
so in
fine
the
with
early
you?
90s,
Okay.
I signed with this label called Instinct. And when I signed with them, they didn't have an office, a name, and they'd never released a record. And so my job was, I set up my studio in the guy who ran the label's living room. So I would make music and also like take records to FedEx and UPS and answer faxes and like clean the kitchen. So I was like the office boy, musician at the same time.
It's kind of, sounds like today in some ways, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah, minus
I mean,
the faxes and UPS or whatever.
We've gone full circle in a certain way in terms of the. But 90s was kind of a breakthrough. The early 90s was
Sometimes
kind of a breakthrough,
it was like
right?
up and down and up
Yeah.
and way down. And then my career in '98 had basically ended.
We don't see it that way.
Well, no, I'd put out an album called Animal Rights, which was this very difficult punk rock record. It sold nothing. It got 2 out of 10 stars in Rolling Stone. I went on tour, and like, for example, we played a show in Paris in a venue that held 150 people, sold 40 tickets. By the end of the show, there were 15 people in the
It's
audience.
like Sparky. You wish Sparky
Yeah, it was like
showed
Sparky
up,
minus
right?
the stick of butter. And so after Animal Rights, I was like, okay, maybe I'll just make music in my spare time and go back. I'd been a philosophy major at school, and I was like, maybe I'll go back to school and get my doctorate and teach philosophy or become an architect. And then I put out this album, Play, which went on to sell like 10 some odd million copies.
But is it right that no label would pick up Play?
Oh yeah, we went to everyone.
And they all said no.
Because, and to their credit, they were right to say no. Meaning, I was basically like a has-been who made this lo-fi record where most of the vocals had been recorded 50 years ago. And this was the time of like the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Limp Bizkit.
Boy bands, yeah.
And I made this weird little record in my bedroom that really should never have been successful.
So, but it's interesting because when you say you had this, I didn't know that it was 100,000 people and only 40 showed up. So.
No, 150 people, 40 showed up.
Okay.
At the end, literally 15 people were there.
Yeah, I mean, so no, but we look back at all the things that you contributed, and we don't, all right. So it was commercially kind of not successful, but was it artistically successful?
Oh, I loved it.
Aha.
I mean,
That's why we don't look at that period as being.
If I had advice, my first piece of advice is don't learn how to do anything else. Like, be incapable of having a real job. And your parents.
Don't tell your parents.
I mean, yeah. But like, for example, my options were make music, teach philosophy at community college, or like, I don't know, clean up at Arby's. Career-wise, those are the only 3 paths I had open to me. So like when music wasn't working out, there were no other options. So I had to keep working at it. Mm-hmm. And the other is, and it seems really self-evident and naive, but just love what you do. So like as a musician, I've been making music for a long time. My job is making music. When I'm not making music, I make music. Like if I'm in my studio working on music and I need to take a break, I go play guitar. And when I want to take a break from that, I go listen to music. Mm-hmm. So love what you do, and you will work every day at it, and it increases the chances that you'll become good at it and have success. Mm-hmm. And then the third is be as open-minded as possible. Like, have good, like, sort of safeguards. Like, don't respond, but be open to what people say. Because, like, I've gotten some of the best feedback from non-experts.
They're just talking about the music, or just reflecting on it, giving you just honest feedback. Yeah,
the way someone responds to music emotionally is so much better than the way that someone responds to it academically or professionally. Mm-hmm. So that's my advice.
So again, kind of going through that 80s period, and then with your creation of Play. So, all right, so you did the ebb and flow of, putting out a record, did you sign with a major label in the 80s?
Yeah, I signed with Elektra.
Elektra.
And then I was with Mute Records, which is an independent label in the UK for a very long time, and they stood by me through everything, which was amazing. But Elektra, so I had this one, and Elektra's a perfectly good label. I'm not maligning anyone. But my manager, this was really funny. I thought this was funny. I was on Elektra, a new president was brought in, and my manager called up at some point and said, oh, so how are things going with the Moby record? And the head of Elektra at the time said, well, to be honest, we're having a hard time with all of our British bands right now. And my manager said, well, Moby's neither British nor a band. I think that was when we realized I was maybe on the wrong label.
We're on the wrong label. I want to have this conversation sort of thread through to the idea that I captured a lot from reading about your, the things that you've written, things that your interviews, kind of this true to yourself moment. You talked about the 80s that you went up, you went down, you went way down, and then Play wouldn't be picked up by anybody, but just zoomed out of there, right? Was Play sort of a pivotal moment for you in terms of the creation of it, or your realization around the commercial sides of all this and the artistic sides, or am I sensing something?
It all seemed like a complete accident, largely because it was. Right. I mean, when Play was I made it on crummy equipment in my bedroom. A Soundcraft Spirit board that barely worked. Literally you'd be like hitting it to try and get like one of the channels to work. Right. The budget for Play was around $10,000. And this is when $10,000 was a week-long catering budget for most major label albums. Right. So it came out, became strangely successful, and and I then disappeared down the rabbit hole of touring, narcissism, alcoholism, entitlement, and that sustained me for a good 5 or 6 years.
Riding the crest of that success.
And then the next,
That was really the commercial success then.
well then,
That was,
and then the next few records commercially didn't do as well in the States, but actually did much better overseas. So all of my touring was in Europe, Eastern Europe, South America, Asia. So I sort of stopped really touring in North America 12 years ago. So I'll do stuff here, but most of the touring was overseas, which definitely fueled, again, the narcissism, the entitlement, alcoholism, etc.
but are you over some of that now?
Oh, hopefully most of it.
Most of it.
Yeah.
What was that process like for you? I mean,
Simply-
what sucked you away from the higher version of you by doing?
Well, when you're ostensibly doing all these things that should be working, meaning like you've got the best publicists and you're dating the sexiest people and you're constantly on tour and you're living in tour buses and you have private planes, you have all this stuff, and you're miserable. At some point, that's when just simple empiricism, where you hopefully take a step back and say, oh, this isn't working. You know, and then about 7 years ago, I had my sort of epiphany where like nothing was working. I was still making music day in, day out, but I was touring constantly and I was really miserable. And I went to go see David Lynch speak. And David Lynch is now one of my good friends and a hero of mine. And he was being interviewed similar to this in London. And he said something so simple. He said, creativity is beautiful. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, he's right. Like, marketing is not beautiful. Touring isn't beautiful. Being obsessed with public figure stuff isn't beautiful. The creativity is the only thing that's worth pursuing. Everything else is fleeting. Everything else is tawdry. But if you can just focus on that creativity, you know, the ability to at least aspire to make something beautiful, that's the goal. You know, and so I feel like as long as I keep doing that, it just increases the chances that every day I will be head over heels in love with what I do.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think, you know, you revealed a lot with that. And I think it's a reality too that, you know, you were in the churn, right? You were touring, we were reading about you, we were hearing about your star was rising. You know, you were a celebrity, right? But that had a cost, right? And you had a reset. And you wandered into a place, and David Lynch helped you reset, right?
I mean, the truth is, if we live in this culture that's obsessed with fame and money. But what's really so strange and ironic is the people who have fame and money are fucking miserable. But yet everyone else pursues it. Like, if fame and money made people happy, the Upper East Side of New York would be filled with puppies. You know, instead it's filled with divorce lawyers, plastic surgeons, mistresses, et cetera, et cetera.
Empty apartments.
Empty apartments.
Empty
I mean, and look at
apartments.
like Beverly Hills, like per capita, it's like the saddest people on the planet and the wealthiest people on the planet. And I'm not saying like I don't think there's anything wrong inherently with fame or wealth, but in and of themselves, they deliver nothing. You know, in fact, and I think oftentimes the pursuit of fame and wealth keeps people from pursuing the things that actually do work, which usually are like creativity, spirituality, friends, dogs, hiking, like simple things that are much more achievable.
Yeah. You know, as I read about your career and tried to understand, you know, again, I didn't see, I guess I had a bias to understand your artistic self. You know, didn't worry. I mean, commercial comes and goes, right? It's just the essence of what your process is. Can you share a little bit about, you know, you're making a new record right now? Are you in the process of creating something? Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, I mean, are you pulled by sounds? Are you pulled by lyrics? Do you have your own personal archaeology of material that just come to you? I mean,
Well, do you know Has everyone here seen the movie Almost Famous? At the very end, William Miller finally gets his interview. What's his name? Billy Crudup's character. And he sits in William Miller's bedroom, and William Miller says, "So, Russell, for a start, what do you love about music?" And Russell says, "For a start, everything." You know, and to me, that's so making a record. Honestly, I don't care what happens to a record once it's released, because I don't really want to tour. It feels dirty to try and convince people to buy something. So, especially music, like convincing someone to pay for music seems weird, because I don't pay for music for the most part. Like, why would I expect other people to? And I just love the process of making a record. So, and that's where the joy comes from. So once it goes out into the world, fine. I hope people like it. Maybe it'll sell, maybe it won't. I don't really care. What I care about is how do I feel about it every day that I'm working on it. You know, so it's not like if I'm playing guitar and recording guitar, I'm not thinking to myself, this isn't important. What's important is whether it sells or whether it makes me famous. It's the playing the guitar and loving that moment. Like that's the important part.
Are there certain days when you go into your studio, which I assume now is a very intimate space, right?
Yeah, I have the most unimpressive studio on the planet.
But isn't that
I live
the
in
way-
LA, and all my friends, like, I'm friends with Linda Perry. She has a 15,000 square foot amazing studio with this huge live room. Or Mark Mothersbaugh has this huge building in Hollywood. Like, all these friends of mine have these amazing, gigantic studios. I'm in a bedroom. I'm very comfortable having some equipment in a bedroom. More than that, like, I don't know what to do.
But that's also the beauty of this time. You can do that in your bedroom. You could do it, right? You could do it on the side in the kitchen. You can have record, right? I mean, you can have a couple of things set up, and you can do it now.
Yeah.
So in that, again, kind of going right to that moment when you decide, I'm ready for a new album, or I have some ideas, I'm ready to put them down. Is it a process of just laying stuff down and then editing, or is it just editing and then putting it down,
So
or conceiving and then putting it down?
Each record I make, it's the same process. I write 300 songs. I really do. I have about 9,000 or 10,000 unreleased songs. And the reason they're unreleased is because most of them are bad. Just to be clear, like, I'm not saying I'm some
Right.
genius savant who has all this great backlog of material. Like, a lot of it's terrible. But so I'll write a couple of hundred songs, narrow it down to 150, narrow it down to 50, narrow it down to 20, and then finish those 20 songs.
So it is an editing process.
Yeah.
It's let it all out, and then the sort of discernment, the wisdom, the ear, right? The experimentation with sound along the way, right? Gets to where you want to go. So
Oh, yeah.
you're really in it, right?
And what I've noticed with a lot of people who aspire to do creative things, they're inhibited sometimes because they edit at the beginning.
Right.
You know, and like, to me, editing should only happen when you're about to play it for other people. You know, every demo you make should be embarrassing. You know, you should go listen to your demos and be like, oh, that's humiliating.
This is really,
but learn from it.
This is really, really important, not only from from an artistic perspective, but from your life and your career development perspective. You know, you got to jump in and try stuff.
Yeah, try
right?
stuff, and
You got to not be afraid.
And don't worry too much about how you're going to be perceived.
Yeah, this is important. Thank you
know?
for helping me with this, because it's a whole idea about, I loved your statement about relative sincerity. What is it? Good intentions, relative sincerity. And how we do, you did say that, by the way. And
Okay.
it was you were very wise. You sounded very, as you are. You're being very, very generous with us. But the whole idea of that you really have to be true to yourself. And that doesn't happen naturally sometimes, right?
Well, and also and maybe this is a little too esoteric, but like, true to yourself, part of that is actually figuring out who you are.
Right.
Not who you ideally want to be. And also, like, it's one of the things I really dislike about our celebrity culture is, like, not just celebrity culture, but people do their best to cover up who they are. You know, like, every indie rocker pretends to be way more cynical than they really are. every rapper pretends to be way tougher than they really are. Every 19-year-old pop singer pretends to be way more sexy than they are. And like, the truth is, we're all messy human beings. We go to the bathroom, we get scared, and we die. You know, no one is exempt from that process. You know, the toughest rapper in the world is scared. The most disaffected indie rocker in the world truly cares about the reviews for his next record. The sexiest 19-year-old ingenue singer is deep down probably like a nerd who just wants to like hold her stuffed animal from when she was 7. You know, like we're all messy, sloppy human beings who at some point will pee on ourselves and die.
Right.
You know. And so when people say like, no, like be true to yourself, it's being true to that version of yourself, like the vulnerable, messy human part of yourself, you know, and like, which is also why like people make such an effort to look good, and it's just not that interesting anymore. You know, like, and if I see that 20-year-old singer and you can tell she's just spent 6 hours being made up and stylized, I'm like, you just look generic.
Right.
Or the indie rocker who looks like every other indie rocker. It's like, just let yourself be who you are. Yeah. It's so much more interesting than aspiring to some generic ideal that doesn't benefit anyone.
And you think if all of us took that into ourselves, how that would translate to the way we would treat others, right? I mean, we would kind of be the world, the change in the world we want to be.
It's funny, I had I played at Coachella a couple years ago, and I was driving down on the 10, and I had the most self-evident epiphany. I was in traffic, as often happens, like in some terrible stretch of the 10, like with like an auto zone here and like some crappy Home Depot here. I'm like, oh, I fucking hate traffic. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, like, no one likes traffic. Like, because you're looking at all these other cars and being like, oh, they're the problem. It's like, no, they hate it just as much as I do. Right. And they're just as like, they're having just as intimate an experience of the human condition as I am in that moment. So it's not like me versus them. It's like everybody's experiencing the exact same thing. Even like our president, even Jay-Z, even whomever, like they're all messy humans, as
It
much as they pretend they're not.
Calms us down too, right?
Yeah, except for Elon Musk, who is a cyborg.
Who is that?
Elon Musk.
Oh.
He started Tesla and SpaceX.
Oh, yeah.
He's like the single most impressive human being on the planet.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Apart from David Lynch.
We didn't want to miss the chance. We're having such an interesting time, and I appreciate your reactions, but we do invite some questions from the audience.
Okay.
Eric, do we have some microphones, or why don't you just stand? We'll get a mic. Here's a mic coming. Just tell us where you're from, your name and where you're from.
Hi, my name is Olivia Odette, and I am a junior in the Music Industry Management program at Ferris State University in Big Rapids, Michigan. And over the past 20 years, music technology, recording, and even just live performances in general, they've changed exponentially, obviously, with all the changes in digital technology. And as students, sometimes we can be taught that a process of how to do something and how to always follow it and stick with it, so don't really look towards the changes. And you've experienced both before digital technology was main process of recording, and what's your best advice for us to actually be open to those ideas, or actually, how did you deal with it, the big changeover from less digital products in recording and live performance to more how they're used today?
Well, I think it's a really good question. It's hard for me to have like a broad general answer, because I mean, again, ultimately, sort of what we've been talking about is the way people respond to music is subjective. But having said that, there needs to be music for people to respond to, and they need to hear it. And that involves technology. So it can be anything. It can be, as we said, like, you know, a Billie Holiday song or a Snoop Dogg song. But what's amazing about the world we live in now, and I feel like I'm completely stating the obvious, is that like the way in which music is created, disseminated, consumed has all completely changed from what it was 20, 30 years ago. And my advice is just be aware of all the technological changes and opportunities, because they're also, like I remember I got in so much trouble about 10 years ago. I was at my record label, and they were talking about their iTunes, like the strategy for iTunes. And I was like, oh, you do know in like 10 years people won't own music. And they got they're like, what do you mean people have always owned music? I was like, no, 15 years they won't. And it's just like movies, like I haven't bought a DVD. The idea of owning a movie or a TV show seems so weird to me. Sadly, I say this as someone who both owns and sells music. In the future, people won't own music. By the future, I mean 5 minutes from now. So it's, and all the technology, like everything changes so fast. So my advice is like be aware of it, but not consumed by it. And be aware that whatever platform you're using probably won't be around in a few years. Whatever platform people use to buy music, listen to music, like Spotify is great. 6 months from now, it might be gone. Pandora is great. 6 months from now, it might be gone. SoundCloud is great. 6 months from now, it might be gone. So don't get too attached to the technology and understand ultimately people ultimately love the music, not the technology. So I don't know if that's relevant to what you're saying. Also, odd prima donna question. May I get some water?
Oh, water.
I'm such a fucking diva.
Yeah. Hey.
No.
Yeah. Sorry, we'll get you some water.
I hate myself.
This is your only diva moment. You're allowed one diva moment. We have one more question, but we do need some water. Eric, we need some water. Okay.
Ma'am, you can I can hear you.
Just yell
and I'll
it out.
repeat your question. Am I still using hardware? Yeah, my studio is. Oh, thank you, Jonathan.
That's Jonathan, by the way.
You call this water? Sorry. I think I just
I'll hold your
dosed
water.
with GHB. No, I'm kidding.
Hold your
Just
water.
only-
I'll hold it.
So my studio is analogs. Like I have acoustic guitars, pedal steel, a bunch of old microphones, a bunch of old synths, a bunch of new synths, some old compressors, some new compressors, some fancy technology, some cheap technology, and then everything goes into Pro Tools. And my favorites, my Juno 106 by Roland. I have this weird Maestro drum machine from 1971. I have the world's largest collection of analog drum machines. It's true. I'm not bragging. Yes, I am. But it is true. I'm up to about 350 analog drum machines now. I'm a hoarder for drum machines. But I have this one drum machine that has an audio input where whatever the drum pattern is becomes a gate for the audio. So it's the weirdest sequenced gate pattern. So sometimes if I'm working on a song and I don't know what to do with it, just take some of the audio and plug it into this drum machine and see what happens. And when I say Pro Tools, like Pro Tools is good, they're all good. Reason is good, Cubase is good, Logic is good. You know, I think whatever digital platform you use to record music on, it's fine. As long, like Avicii, a friend of mine was with him when he made that Wake Me Up before it's, what's that song called? The big one?
Yeah.
It's popular with the young persons.
Right.
Was with him when he made that. He made it on Fruity Loops in 30 minutes, start to finish. Fruity Loops. That's not even a real thing. So, but apparently it's like it's whatever works.
And whatever makes you feel good. And that song makes a lot of people feel
It's a great song, yeah.
This has been so enjoyable. I want to hear about what you're working on now and kind of what's next. And then if you're comfortable, if there's anything you would play for us.
Play, sure, like what?
Well, what you have to, we've got a guitar here, we've got a piano. There, we've got on hold for you if you want to.
Yeah,
I
those
think
guitars are nice.
This is with the music. This is the stuff over here that we've set aside.
Sound-wise, are they all plugged in? Oh, okay.
This over here.
What's
this
that?
is the piano keyboard.
I
and
probably wouldn't use a piano.
What?
Something weird about like wearing a headset playing piano. I feel like like some weird adult contemporary guy.
Okay. We don't want to put you in that position. We
Yeah.
really would want.
Like I've been to too many like Marriott hotel lobbies.
Right, no,
where
no,
you
we don't
see,
want to do
like-
that too. But we
Yeah.
do have an acoustic guitar
Okay.
over there. Should I get it for you? Would you be?
Sure, that one?
Okay. Let me. And then maybe tell us a little while I'm getting it for you. Tell us a little bit what you're working on or kind of where you're headed.
Oh,
What's
sure.
next?
Well, I'm making a record, and I don't expect anyone to buy it. Beyond that, it's fun making the record. But as I said, 2015, if you're a musician in your 40s and you expect people to buy your record, you're sadly deluded. Like,
Might need a little check there.
ooh, sounds fine. So we can play.
That's from my era.
Classic rock. I actually had this idea years ago. I was going to start a band called Dr. Pavlov and His Dogs,
There's a Sparky, right?
and you only play 5 seconds of songs. So it's like, wait, oh, it's not in tune. That's the whole song. Like, why do you need more?
The rest happens in the, right,
Yeah.
you're taking out, you're playing it. Nope. All right.
That's it. I
Enough.
mean, like, the rest of
Enough,
it's
right.
filler. It's a little out of tune. You know what else is fun? Play classic songs that are in a major key, do everything in a minor key, and you turn these happy songs into like the dirgiest songs. Like Sweet Home Alabama, like, and said, Sweet Home Alabama, where those skies are so blue. Sweet home Alabama. Lord, I'm coming. I feel like Paul Robeson.
I know.
One of my favorites is, you know the Twisted Sister song, We're Not Gonna Take It? Like, we're not gonna take it. No, we ain't gonna take it. In a minor key. We're not gonna take it.
It's very mellow, right?
No, we ain't gonna take it. We're not gonna take it anymore. Or
It's amazing what a
jazz versions of classic rock songs. Ready? Last night, a little dancer came dancing to my door. Last night, a little angel came pumping on the floor. She said, come on, baby, I got a license for love. And if it expires, rain hell from above, because in the midnight hour, she cried more, more, more. With a rebel yell, she cried more, 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 more.
Oh, it's wonderful. You know, you're telling us we got to be flexible and we got to pay attention, right? We've got to know it a lot.
So,
And
and if
open
you're a
to it.
guitar player or a keyboard player, it's also fun to accompany, like if friends of you are telling stories, just accompany them. Because like all of a sudden, like if they're telling you a sad story and you start playing country western, they can't tell us that, like. It's like, well, I just broke up with my girlfriend and, you know, the Lexapro isn't working and I think I'm going to buy some razor blades and I feel so much better. So
So,
I'm available for bar mitzvahs, etc.
Moby, this has been delightful. We can't thank you enough.
My pleasure.
Sharing and being so open with us. Wasn't this inspiring?
Thanks.
Thank you. We're going to let these good kids go on their way to their next class. They got a lot of stuff they got to do. Look at your schedules. Hey, this is wonderful, isn't it? Look at your schedules for all the cool things you got happening here at the NAMM Show. The show is open, ready to go. Be sure you come back here Saturday at 4 o'clock for the Sandy Feldstein Potsdam Korean School of Music Roundtable. You got to have a session card all ready to turn in. That means you could win a raffle, a Wi-Fi speaker, or even a Visa $200 gift card.